So welcome to Brandywine Online. I'm Mary Cronin, the Director of Audience Engagement. In just a few minutes, we'll be peeking behind the scenes of a fascinating exhibition, The Crafted World of Wharton Esherick. This exhibition opens at Brandywine Museum of Art this Sunday, October 13th, and it will be on view through January 19th, 2025. We have two more programs that I want to tell you about coming up soon that will focus on Esherick, and you can register for these on Brandywine's website. There will be an in-person tour of the exhibition with curator Emily Zilber on Thursday, October 24th at 2 p.m., and this is included with museum admission. And there will be another online program on Thursday, November 14th at 2 p.m. to explore the studios of both Wharton Esherick and N.C. Wyeth, two artists who had much in common, but who likely never met, although their studios were only about 20 miles apart. So we'll be looking more into that with both Emily and Brandywine Senior Curator Amanda Burden in conversation on that program on November 14th. And I'll point out that both the N.C. Wyeth House and Studio and the Wharton Esherick Museum are members of the Historic Artist Homes and Studios program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. During today's program, you're invited to add any questions into the chat, and we'll leave time for discussion at the end of the presentation. We are recording the program, and we'll share that link in a week or so with all who are registered. And now I'm pleased to welcome Emily Zilber, the Wharton Esherick Museum's Director of Curatorial Affairs and Strategic Partnerships, to give us an advanced look at the crafted world of Wharton Esherick. And Emily, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mary, and to the Brandywine Museum of Art for hosting the conversation today and for being such an exceptional partner. I have ducked out of installation in order to be here to chat with all of you today. So I'm thrilled to kind of give you a little bit of a sneak preview, an introduction to and a peek behind the scenes of the crafted world of Wharton Esherick. This is an exciting new exhibition focusing on the American artist Wharton Esherick that includes over 70 artworks reflecting Esherick's iconoclastic and expansive creative voice, drawn exclusively from the collection of the Wharton Esherick Museum. And so we have close to 3,000 objects, artworks in our holdings there, the vast majority of which Esherick made and lived alongside. And so everything that's coming to the Brandywine is coming from WEM's collection, which is very exciting. So while Wharton Esherick's work is in the collection of major museums nationwide, and you can see on the left the fireplace and doorway from the library of the Bach House at the Philadelphia Museum, which I imagine that many Brandywine visitors may be familiar with. And while select works from the Wharton Esherick Museum's collection were exhibited at other venues during Esherick's lifetime, I'm showing on the right here an installation shot from Masters of Contemporary American Crafts at the Brooklyn Museum in 1961, where you can see the drop leaf desk that will be in the exhibition at the Brandywine and which we can talk about. We'll talk about a little later on a platform that is much smaller than the installation team at the Brandywine here would ever let us get away with. While this exposure to Esherick's work kind of exists out there in the world, the crafted world of Wharton Esherick marks the first time that many of the objects that will be on view have been on loan to another institution, or the first time that some of them have been on loan in the 5 decades since the Wharton Esherick Museum was founded, which is very exciting. So in our time together today, I'll share a little bit about Esherick's biography. I'll also introduce you to the home and studio site that provides the content for this show. I'll talk a little bit about the collaboration between the Brandywine and the Esherick Museum to develop the exhibition, including how we thought about translating what's special and unique about Esherick's studio to a more formal gallery setting and the genesis of our partnership. we hope that that will entice you not only to come see the show at the Brandywine, but also if you haven't yet been to the Wharton Esherick Museum, to visit us there as well. Born in 1887, Wharton Esherick grew up as one of 7 children in a well-to-do West Philadelphia family. His parents envisioned their son living a more conventional, upper-class lifestyle. Even so, Esherick was determined to be an artist from a very early age. We have sort of apocryphal stories of him getting up early so that he could draw the horse that the milkman rode down the street in the morning, so that he'd have a sort of animal subject to draw. He studied woodworking and metalsmithing at Philadelphia's Central Manual Training High School and drawing and printmaking at the Pennsylvania Museum and School of Industrial Art, which later became the University of the Arts. In 1908, Esherick entered the painting program at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, where he had the opportunity to learn from significant American Impressionists who may be familiar to Brandywine's audiences. I'm including images here from 2 of Esherick's teachers, William Merritt Chase and Edward Willis Redfield, who are both of these works are in the collection of the Brandywine Museum. Still, Esherick yearned for more freedom to experiment stylistically than PAFA afforded him. He left PAFA just 6 weeks shy of completing the 2-year non-degree program in 1910. For the next several years, Esherick worked as a commercial illustrator, although he was not a terribly successful one. In 1912, Esherick married a similarly unconventional and artistic woman, Letitia Nofer, Letty. The next year, the pair settled in an 1830s farmhouse on Valley Forge Mountain, 25 miles west of Philadelphia, and named their new home Sunnycrest. You can see Sunnycrest on the right, for its southern exposure. There they really embarked on an experiment in homesteading and living a creative, organic lifestyle. Wharton and Letty cultivated gardens to feed their family, which grew to include 3 children. They kept bees, they raised animals. Letty had a peony farm and taught dance. And Esherick was able to really devote himself to painting and leave commercial illustration behind. On the left, I love this image of Wharton and Letty under the grape arbor at Sunnycrest, giving you a sense of their sort of engagement with the natural world around them. So for over a decade, Esherick attempted to make a living off of Impressionist style canvases, similar to what you see here. The Apple Orchard from 1919 on the right, and a self-portrait also from 1919. This hangs in the Wharton Esherick Museum and will be a part of the Brandywine exhibition. Esherick here is depicting himself in a traditional painter's smock. He's got brushes resting on the windowsill behind him. He is really taking on that identity as a painter. And while the painting that we're looking at here really showcases his deft handling of some of the primary elements of American Impressionism, we've got these kind of soft colors, expressive brushstrokes, well-captured light. Esherick's unique voice was still in formation. He had not yet become the artist that we would come to know him as. Only months after making these works, Esherick reached a turning point in his career. Letty's study of avant-garde educational theory brought the family to Fairhope, Alabama, to the site of an artist's colony and organic school. She was hoping to study there. They went with their children. Esherick was going to paint in Fairhope. He began also carving wooden frames with designs that often reflected the subjects of the paintings they surrounded. So you can see here Moonlight on Alabama Pines. This is 1919 to 1920, where we have this lovely painting, and then the frame is hand carved by Esherick with this abstracted pattern of pine needles, so that you have this real collapsing of the hierarchy between the central image and the exterior frame as a sort of supplement or a support. This is something that opens up Esherick's world. He begins to work in wood in lots of other ways, including carving wooden blocks for printmaking. He'd eventually carve over 400 unique blocks. Esherick also began working with three-dimensional forms during this time. He both carved designs into pre-existing furniture and also created works of sculpture that bridged between arts and crafts and modernist ideas. I'm showing here a small sculpture called The Race. This was among one of the first three-dimensional objects made by Esherick after his initial experiments in carving wooden frames. And I should mention that this piece, The Race, and Moonlight on Alabama Pines are both in the exhibition at Brandywine. You'll have a chance to see these in person if you come. The race is inspired by a horse racing game owned by Esherick's children. But instead, this piece transforms the original static figures of the riders into these evocations of speed and movement. We have a repeated figure of a horse and rider rendered using sharp angles and a slight variation in pose, and then this kind of narrative tension in the way that they're mounted on a piece of wood that narrows to sort of emphasize the leader in position. We won't have these in the exhibition, but Esherick did make a set of color-coded dice so that his children could indeed play the game with these figures. So by the mid-1920s, Esherick was making his own larger scale furniture. I'm showing here the drop leaf desk. This is in the exhibition, and again, that image from the Brooklyn Museum show, so you can get a sense of the object there. We've got this sort of beautiful work where pictorial patterning offers multiple abstracted views of a single landscape. We have the birds above, the tree branches in the middle, and the crops growing out of the field below. It also sort of recalls the uninked surface of a woodblock. You can imagine taking an inked roller, rolling it up the surface of this, and sort of printing. And so we're still in a place where image and furniture are not integrated in the way that they would come to be later in his career. He would go on to combine traditional furniture joinery with modernist sculptural form in order to express a singular artistic vision. And it's really this refusal to let categories or hierarchies stand in the way of his own creativity. That's one of the reasons that Esherick is often thought of as the father of American studio furniture, which is a mid-century movement in which individual practitioners, many of them formally and academically trained, created furniture objects as singular works of art rather than for industry. It's also one reason that despite this sort of strong connection with furniture, Esherick is really an interdisciplinary maker. Esherick had his hands in almost every kind of creative practice that you can think of, ranging from prints to designs for theater to metalworking. And as we go through the presentation today, and as you come to the exhibition, you'll see that we've tried to show the expansive nature of his thinking in the exhibition. So located just a short drive from the Brandywine, Esherick built a Hillside Studio, which later became his full-time home, starting in 1926, and he did the last edition in 1966. He did this as he was committing himself to working three-dimensionally, finding himself in need of a larger workspace to accommodate those ambitions. He discovered the ideal site to sort of do this work up the hill from Sunnycrest. And so we can imagine coming up through the sort of the branches below. I'm showing here an image of the back side of Esherick's studio, but that would have been the front side when Esherick first built the original portion. This is what he would have come up to. I'm also showing the print Diamond Rock Hill. This is in the exhibition. It shows the view from the site where the studio was built looking down the slope onto Sunnycrest. And so Esherick's daily walk between Sunnycrest and the studio was this path uphill through the woods. As Esherick was making the transition between these two spaces, he walked through the material that would come to define him as an artist. For Esherick, the studio was an autobiography in 3 dimensions that fully integrated art and life as one. It reflected his aesthetic interests, artistic ambitions, and physical labor across many decades. And so you can see here the 1926 image of the studio with a small addition, the image from 1947 where you have a sort of larger addition that's been added, and then the silo and the porch there, which is completed in 1966. So for 40 years, this space is a work in progress to Esherick, not only as his practice is changing, but also as it transitions from being primarily a workshop space to primarily a living space. This photograph, taken by Esherick's client and friend Consuelo Kanaga, shows him at the entrance to the Hillside Studio shortly after the first phase of construction. So this is circa 1927. So he's leaning up against the doorway to the studio, which would have looked like the image and still does look like the image on the right. And so not only do you have this sort of beautiful color that's been woven in, but also the hand-carved handle to the door. So everything in the studio and everything in Esherick's world is given this attention, given this care. Nothing is too small to be considered, even the sort of handle that allows you to enter into the space. Esherick passed away in 1970, and in 1972, the studio opened to the public as the Wharton Esherick Museum. So there was a very short amount of time between when Esherick was living in the space and when it became a public-facing organization. And for that reason, we are lucky to have a studio that, unlike a lot of other artist homes and studios, has not had to be recreated based on what we know about the space, but is really chock full of the things that the artist lived with. He knew the space would be open to the public in his lifetime. So that's a really exciting prospect. It means that we have a lot of rich material to work with. WEMS campus is a National Historic Landmark for architecture and includes several other buildings, which are themselves objects in the collection. I'm showing here at front a 1928 garage built to house Esherick's Model T Ford, and behind that, a workshop built to accommodate Esherick's practice as it expanded in the 1950s. Here is another view of it, so you can kind of get a sense of how these buildings abut each other, although I will say that nothing is like seeing these spaces in person, and I encourage folks, if they haven't, to come to our site and especially to take an architecture tour. The workshop building from 1956 was designed in collaboration with the famed modernist architects Louis Kahn and Anne Ting. And so we've got Louis Kahn's initials on the building with Wharton Esherick, and I'm showing here again the way that the two buildings abut each other. This is only one of 9 residential projects that Kahn designed over the course of his career. And then the interior of the workshop, which is not currently open to the public except through those architecture tours that I mentioned, but this is by the 1950s, by the 1960s, when Esherick's woodworking was at the center of his practice. This was the kind of space in which he was making. Here's an image of the main gallery at the Wharton Esherick Museum. You can see where the drop leaf desk that is a part of the Brandywine show has a central pride of place in this space. And so you can start to get a sense of what it was like to decide what could come out and what could stay in the space. Our collection at the Wharton Esherick Museum is rich enough that while the show is not a comprehensive retrospective, we are able in the exhibition to follow the artist's career from his early woodcut illustrations for books by the avant-garde literati to his really revolutionary reimagining of furniture as organic sculpture. The works in the exhibition are presented in thematic installations rather than grouped by chronology or media to reflect the way that you would encounter the objects in the studio. So when you're coming to visit the Wharton Esherick Museum, when you're coming to visit anybody's home, we don't have one room that's focused on, who we were in the 1960s and one room that's focused on who we were in the 1970s. We have all of the things that we've collected over our lifetime interspersed and in conversation with each other. And so that kind of cross-pollination is something that we wanted to translate from the studio space into the exhibition gallery. Want to run through the spaces here. The main gallery here overlooking the sculpture well, where Esherick has cited large-scale sculptures, and you can here see where the self-portrait is situated in the studio if you look at the center of the image. The studio bedroom, so this is really Esherick's private space away from, when the downstairs was a workspace, away from work or away from more public-facing functions of the home. And then the bedroom there from the other side. So this sort of wonderful solitary retreat. Images, this image includes several works that are in the exhibition, including the table at the center of the image. The studio kitchen. Esherick grew up sailing. He made great use of very small spaces, and I think you can see that here in the sort of way that these wraparound shelves have these little lips on them to keep things nice and neat, and in the way that Esherick has found creative storage. And so we're not always looking at sort of the sort of conventional way that you might hang things, thinking about what other opportunities there might be. And then the studio dining room, where we have this real kind of symphony of different ways of thinking about and working with wood. We know that we can't replicate the special qualities of the studio. There is no way to take this and bring it to the Brandywine or to any sort of white-walled museum gallery. And certainly we hope we don't want to do that, because what we hope is that you will come to the Wharton Esherick Museum and tour the studio and see the space there. But we hope to echo some of what it feels like to be in the space in the design of the exhibition. One of the exciting things about having this material travel to the Brandywine is that while you don't get this sense of Esherick's overlapping objects and the sort of proliferation of materials. For conservation reasons, the Wharton Esherick Museum can only have 6,000 visitors a year. And that is far fewer than will be exposed to his material, his work at the Brandywine. And so we get to take this material that we want to share with the whole world and do it in a little different way, and hope that folks will follow the trail back to the studio. So we hope to echo some of the sort of qualities here. Thinking through how to translate what's special about Esherick's studio to the design of the space itself, we thought about interesting angles and shapes and where they occur in the studio. We thought about the way that Esherick delineates space through color. He's trained formally as a painter, and so color, whether it's the way that he's using it on the casings of the windows, as you see on the left, or even in to sort of delineate the logs for his log cabin construction garage on the right. How can we use color to sort of show where construction and geometry is? We were interested in overlapping views so that a visitor can make thematic and visual connections between objects that they might not think to link together. And showing here on the left, the view sort of looking down the staircase from Esherick's bedroom, where you have this wonderful overlapping of Esherick's furniture, but also sculptural objects, books, textiles, all sorts of different kinds of things. And then on the right, from the interior of the sculpture well, showcasing a number of pieces that you will find when you come to the Brandywine to see the exhibition there. We're interested in the sense of things unfolding and overlapping within a singular sightline. And this is one of my favorite views of the studio site. So this is outside of the loading doors to the studio, where you can look up the hill and see the 1926 stone portion of Esherick's building, the 1940 addition, a sliver of the 1966 silo, the 1956 workshop, and the 1928 garage, all in one kind of unfolding timeline. Even though it's out of chronology, you get this sort of sense of the space as it unfolds before you. And so we were interested in that feeling. And then, you know, not a linear chronology, as we've talked about, but a kind of thread that doubles back on itself over and over again, this spiral that was really important to Esherick. And so I'm showing on the right here the spiral staircase that has become this iconic feature of Esherick's studio, and that really is perhaps the best encapsulation of this sort of spiral theme that we find, this kind of torqued form that we find in much of his work, and then a view from above where we get a sense of these overlapping stair treads as they come down in the spiral. So we wanted to have something that, you know, wasn't just linear, but could spiral back on itself. So in the exhibition, by strategically juxtaposing artworks, objects, historic photography, and other riches from Wem's collection, we hope that visitors will be able to see how Esherick returned to core themes and interests throughout his 7-decade-long career, regardless of form, format, or medium. And so when you come to the exhibition, there are 4 guiding themes that will kind of help situate you as you're looking at the work. We talk about rural and urban landscapes. We talk about pattern and form. We talk about natural growth and the way that things grow in the sort of natural world. And we talk about the human body in motion. So I just want to show you kind of examples of each of those themes as we have them in the exhibition. So rural and urban here, Esherick maintained an identity as a rural artist throughout his career. He was living on Valley Forge Mountain outside of the city, but his lifestyle on the mountainside coexisted with deep ties to urbanity. Much of his artwork arose from close connections with avant-garde artists and writers, actors and performers, and savvy clients in intellectual and creative circles in Philadelphia and New York City. We see here in these woodcut illustrations, he's navigating a sort of this existence between city and country. Geometric, high contrast compositions depict both rural life and moments of cosmopolitan pleasure. Many of them also explore how we expect labor to look in each setting. So we've got on the left the work of harvesting in this illustration for Walt Whitman's As I Watched the Plowman Plowing. And then on the right, the work of the urbane writer in his print from 1 year later, Of a Great City. This shows Esherick's good friend, the noted author Theodore Dreiser, in his apartment on 57th Street in New York City, hard at work while the city kind of teems outside behind him. We look at pattern. Pattern was one of the most significant bridges between Esherick's work in 2 and 3 dimensions. And I'm showing here the flat top desk chair, and flat top desk figure. All 3 of these will be in the exhibition at the Brandywine. Esherick already engaged with pattern by placing his painting in frames hand carved with both pictorial and abstract patterns, and in doing so really brought new life to his 2-dimensional work, as he made more three-dimensional works in wood, both furniture and sculpture, he explored new ways of thinking about repetition and ornamentation that found possibilities not only in how he applied his kind of geometry and sense of pattern making to an object, but also in the material itself. So repeating forms, carefully positioned grains, the way that you might have a subtle variation in tone, and the material selection that Esherick engaged in are just some of the ways that he used pattern to communicate in the work. I'm showing here the flat top desk, which was the bottom was produced in 1929, and we have this kind of wonderful pattern that's created through these incised handles that you can just put your fingers, hook them up inside, and it becomes this really interesting way to engage with the piece tactily, that has sort of the inverse pattern on the back of the chair in the negative space of the triangle there. And then you'll notice that it's 1929 and 1962. The top of the table dates from that later time, where Esherick has, really engaged with thinking about biomorphism and is looking at the sort of braining and unconventional ways of matching the wood as he's crafting this beautiful tabletop, which was the last of many that were on top of the flat top desk. Just so you have a sense of, this is an image of the desk shortly after it was created in the late 1920s, where it had its original top, which was made of aluminum sheet. So a very different permutation of an object. But again, the strength of that geometric patterning is clear in an image like this. So we're thinking also about the way things grow and growth in the natural world. Nature was not simply a subject matter for Esherick, but fully integrated into his artistic output, into his personal identity and his lifestyle. Across his practice, we see this desire to bring not just depictions of nature, but to bring the mechanisms of nature, the sort of way that nature works, into alignment with the built environment. So we get a lot of branching, serpentine, spiraling, and asymmetric forms that permeate Esherick's work and the studio building itself. The studio seems to grow out of the land on which it's situated, and that's intentional. Esherick was very interested in theories of organic architecture at the time. And in particular, Esherick saw the upward twist as formally embodying this idea of natural growth. And so we get this gesture, this twist, which we saw in the spiral staircase earlier. We get that in models for major architectural commissions, like the models that we show here. These will both be in the exhibition. Model for the theater lobby stair at the Hedgerow Theater in Rose Valley, as well as the chimney stair model for the Bach House. So this would have been the staircase to match with that fireplace that's now in the collection of the Philadelphia Museum. This staircase is in the collection of the Wolfsonian Museum, and we're lucky enough to have the model that we'll be able to show you. And just to give you a bit of a sneak preview, so we've got these staircase models in the exhibition space, with the sort of images taken from the studio to give us a sense of what happens in miniature and how it might be manifested on a larger scale. So bodies in space, the way that the sort of themes of bodies, movement, and gesture appear throughout Esherick's work is another theme that we're engaged with in the exhibition. We have early two-dimensional works, including portraits, life drawings, sketches of performing dancers and actors that have this representational approach to the human form. I'm showing here a woodblock print titled Rhythms Opening that depicts a dancer doing a series of sequential poses. And so we're not only getting a sense of the sort of lyricism of the body here, but how it changes over time as the pose changes. This is one figure who is in different poses as opposed to a group of figures together. This print appeared on the cover of a brochure for the Gardner Doing Dance Camp, a center for modern dance in upstate New York. And the image kind of embodies this belief common to many of the progressive artistic communities that Esherick engaged with during the 1920s and 30s, which is that human, creative, and natural rhythms are inextricably interconnected. And so we see that deep understanding of the human body brought with Esherick to his work in 3 dimensions, where he explored how abstract bodily movement might be used as the kind of emotional or compositional foundation for non-representational works of art, including furniture. And so on the left here, I'm showing a library ladder from 1969. This is one of Esherick's most widely celebrated forms, first produced in 1966 after a client requested a sort of more elegant and graceful design than the typical library stool. It has this wonderful gentle twist in the handle. We talked about the twist, the spiraling treads that might make us think of some of those spiral staircases, and an undulating post that culminates in this rounded handle. It fits within the palm of the user's hand and offers a kind of intimacy and tactile pleasure as well as functionality. It also reflects the gestures captured by Esherick's early depictions of dancers in motion. And I'm showing on the right here a dance sketch from around 1929. Both the library ladder and the sketch are in the exhibition. A quick sketch of dancers in motion like this captures this kind of twisted legs, torqued bodies, outstretched arms with these just a few strategic lines. And when these movements are pared down and abstracted, we can make connections between this foundation and the sculpture that the sculptural furniture that Esherick would go on to create. So we began discussing a potential collaboration between the Wharton Esherick Museum and the Brandywine several years ago. We had originally planned to do just a small exhibition focused on Esherick's prints. As planning for that began to commence, it became clear very quickly that there was much more potential for our collaboration together. And so the crafted world of Wharton Esherick grew organically over the course of several years, out of time spent together in the studio discussing possibilities for the exhibition, lots of good conversation to identify the scope and focus, and then work to select the objects, including some really ambitious objects to move like Oblivion, which you see here both in the studio where it is perched above the sculpture well, and on the right in a 1934 photograph in process by the artist Marjorie Content. This organic fluid sculpture offers this kind of exaggerated rendering of emotion as you have these 2 intertwined bodies carved from a single log that really dissolve into one another. This was incredibly challenging to move, but as we decided to not just focus on 2-dimensional work and really bring the scope of these special works from the studio to the Brandywine, became a focal point for what we could do as collaborators. And I'm showing here an installation view of the piece in situ, where we don't have a chance to see it within that context, but we have a chance to really focus on the piece and see it in a way that I, after my years at the Esherick Museum, have never really been able to engage with it before. As Mary mentioned at the beginning of the talk, Brandywine and WEM are 2 of the 4 sites in Pennsylvania which belong to the Historic Artists Homes and Studios program, or HOSS, which is an associate sites program of the National Trust, a coalition of 55 museums that were the homes and working studios of American artists. And so we knew that from the way that Brandywine champions the preservations of the Wyeth's homes and studios, and it has exemplary space for changing exhibitions, that when we took something like Oblivion out of its, out of its original context, we would have a wonderful place for it to be installed for the time that it was away from the studio and before it comes back into the space where it has called home for 5 decades at this point. So Brandywine, we've also discovered along the way many points of connection between Brandywine and WEM, including connections between Esherick and N.C. Wyeth. They have very similar life dates, 1887 to 1970 for Esherick and 1882 to 1945 for N.C. Wyeth. They were contemporaries of one another. They chose to build studios in rural areas outside of Philadelphia. They were linked through Esherick's work as a commercial illustrator and printmaker. And so we are also finding new information that suggests that they may have overlapped more than we thought. And so we're going to have a very exciting conversation in mid-November about this. But it made sense to sort of situate Esherick's work within the collections and the space that Brandywine has. Brandywine's collections also highlight the work of artists who have associations with sort of regional Pennsylvania art and design. And, likewise, Esherick worked for the majority of his life less than an hour from Brandywine and found most of his raw material in the space outside of the studio. So we really think of the Brandywine Museum as an ideal partner for audiences to encounter Esherick's work for the first time in a more formal museum setting, and then to be able to come and see it in situ, just a short drive away. And so you'll see a lot if you come to the Brandywine Museum of Art, but what will you see if you come to the Esherick Museum? With over 70 works on loan, it's good that we have almost 3,000 objects total in the collection to visit at WEM. So there's still plenty for you to see if you come to visit us while the show is up at Brandywine, including works that were not previously on view. I'm showing here 2 images of the studio where there are new installations in both the main gallery and the bedroom. In the main gallery on the left, you have Esherick's easel, which we've brought out, which holds a rarely seen painting titled Forest Fantasy, while the center of the room showcases a significant loan from a private collection. This is Esherick's 1931 trestle table made for his friend, the artist Hannah Weil. In the bedroom, on the right, the central desk there, which is now at the Brandywine, has been replaced by an arrangement of furniture that approximates how Esherick used the room during his lifetime. That table was not there during his lifetime. Complete with one of the artist's cardigans, sweaters, and red leather caps. And so we're able to bring out pieces of ephemera, including clothing that we weren't able to bring out before. And so I think that now is a perfect time, even if you've been to the studio before, to visit both spaces so that you can see not only Esherick's work from WEM's collection in a new context, but also for WEM, because we don't have a changing exhibition space, this opportunity has given us a chance to pull some things out of our archives and bring them before our audiences, which we're very, very excited about. We also have in our visitor center at the museum a small exhibition titled Rhythms of Work, which brings together a selection of artifacts from Esherick's studio practice. So there I'm talking about furniture works in progress, tools, and archives. We're looking to highlight Esherick's approach to furniture making as kind of fundamentally collaborative. Here he is with collaborator Bill McIntyre, and open to modern technologies. The exhibition also draws on a recent gift to WEM by Eric Hartshaw of tools and other objects that his father, woodworker and home builder Horace Hartshaw, had acquired from the Esherick workshop. So some really exciting things going on at the museum. While we know that nothing replaces a visit to the site, we do hope that visitors to the crafted world of Wharton Esherick will feel that they have been introduced to Esherick's singular voice, creativity, and skill when they come to the Brandywine. The exhibition is accompanied by a fully illustrated catalog, including newly commissioned photography of the studio campus taken by the renowned architectural photographer Joshua McHugh. I'm showing images of that publication on the right here, as well as new essays which speak to the themes explored in the exhibition. Two of those essays by folks from the Esherick staff, two of those essays by design and culture writers and curators. We've got fresh perspectives and research in all of them. After Brandywine, the exhibition will travel to the Chazen Museum of Art at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Taft Museum of Art in Cincinnati, Ohio. And we hope that, maybe you'll even have a chance to see it in more than one venue. I look forward to seeing many of you in the galleries, whether it is for a special program or a walkthrough or just as you're exploring. And I'd be happy to answer any questions as we close up for today.
Thank you so much, Emily. Really fascinating, and you've given us so much to look for in the gallery when we open this show this Sunday. We do have a few questions. I can help share those. You just showed that picture of Esherick doing a collaboration, and someone asked, did Wharton Esherick work alone in his workshop, or did he have others assisting him?
Mm-hmm. So both. Esherick had collaborators that he worked with regularly, and he also was a prolific maker and was always making and did many things independently. He was never formally trained in furniture making, but did start out his career working in the workshop of John Schmidt, trained cabinet maker who Esherick was able to sort of learn at the feet of. And so one of the things that you will see in the exhibition, and especially if you come to the Rhythms of Work exhibition at WEM, are some of these sort of stories that complicate the notion of Esherick as an artist isolated from a larger community of other artists and also potential collaborators.
Great. At the very beginning, you showed the studio door, and someone asks, what does the nails configuration on the door mean?
Let's go back there, because I'm not quite sure what you mean, and we can see if we can figure it out together. We'll get there. Oh, here we go. Just the way that the nails are on the door. I think that's just, when you have this kind of wonderful asymmetrical door handle, you need fewer at the bottom than the top. I don't know if there's something more specific to it than that.
Always curious when an artist has done something. Yeah, if there's a
Emily, I'm wondering, I think it's the patches that you see on the wood there that looks like either fill or nail heads or some almost like X shapes or just a pattern, right?
Yeah, well, and I think, you have to remember that the studio was an active workspace. Before Esherick lived in it. It changed a great deal over the 40 years that Esherick was alive, and as it transformed from that active workspace to a home. And so, as with all of us, we bear the signs of age and change. So the building does too. I see the question here about how tall is Oblivion, and I'll go back to
as you're going back to that, we also had a question about how to explain the meaning of the Oblivion sculpture and the emotional embrace between man and woman. So while you're looking at that,
okay.
Not only how tall, but what does it mean?
Well, I think you can see in this image, you can get a sense of the sort of height, that this is larger than life sized. And so when you have a chance to come and be with the piece in the space, it will feel kind of enveloping. I think when we think about the meaning of the sculpture and this emotional embrace, Esherick was interested in feeling. He was inspired by theater, and so he's sketching after theatrical performers, but he's really interested in how do you take a sort of general feeling and evoke that. And I think any of us can recall a time where we have had a connection with another person that has been transformative or that has been special to us. And so I think there's a lot there to make this general for folks.
I ran back to the checklist, Emily, just for the statistics,
Yes.
77 inches tall.
There we go. So quite tall, took a lot of work to move that out of the studio, and was probably the most complicated piece that we were able to make the very short but very long trip between the sites.
And well worth it. I was fortunate to be able to see that in the gallery, and I think it's really stunning.
Yeah, I see a couple of different questions about Esherick's personal life and his children and his wife. We will have, I would encourage folks to get the publication, which goes into that in greater depth. But I think, probably what's important to know here is that Esherick eventually moved up the hill into the studio after his marriage with Letty was sort of dissolving, and he lived there with his son Peter for years, and then alone, and then with his partner later in life. Letty and Esherick, their relationship did not last the whole Esherick's whole life, and so there's personal stories there that I think are well told in both our new publication as well as the Esherick biography, which is out there. I will say that, this is not a retrospective exhibition. It is not intended to be a biographical exhibition, but instead to really give people an introduction to the themes and expansive thinking that Esherick brought with him to the art that he made.
I see question, did Esherick design the wooden pendant light covers that hang in his studio?
Yes. And so that's going to be my answer to almost any question about did Esherick design X that I see in his studio. So one of the very special things about the studio space, and I'm trying to go back to, there we go, the pendant light covers, is that, Esherick not only designed furniture, which he is best known for, but also design objects and prints and theatrical costumes and set designs and sculpture. And so when you come to the exhibition at the Brandywine and when you visit the Wharton Esherick Museum, everything that you see, regardless of the form that it takes or the media that it is in, Esherick largely had a hand in it.
And while we won't have those pendant lamps in the exhibition, there is a table lamp in the exhibition, and the light bulb is in it, but we're not turning it on.
There is a wonderful image of it on in the catalog, though. So if you're interested in Esherick's lighting, that's a great place to go. I'm seeing the question at the end here. Will you consider changing exhibitions, allowing other works of the 3000 to be on view? We have done so. So I hope that you will come and see that. It's very exciting chance for us to bring new works out into the museum space.
We have a question that looks ahead to the program in November, but whether N.C. Wyeth or Andrew Wyeth knew Wharton Esherick.
I see Amanda.
Yes.
Amanda wants to leave that in this.
New research coming soon. Yeah.
There is too much that is similar about their life dates, about their interests, and about their proximity to one another, for there not to be points of connection that are thematic, if not chronological, and likely there were both.
Someone asked when the pieces that are on loan will be returned to display, I guess after this long traveling exhibition.
They will be gone for about a year because they are going to 3 venues. And when they come back to WEM, they will not be traveling for a very long time. So they will deserve a nice long rest at home. And so, while this is really new territory for us at the Wharton Esherick Museum to have these pieces that are really icons of our site traveling and out in the world, it's such an exciting opportunity. And we do know that on the other side of it, so many more people will have seen them, and that they will have a chance to stay at the museum for another 50 years and beyond.
Someone wants to know, will the Con Studio be open to the public?
So the Con Studio is open to the public through architecture tours. Those are specialty tours at the Wharton Esherick Museum. And, ideally in the future, we will have it open as public museum space, but currently it is not open as a part of our standard tour.
There's a question about the puzzle of the kitchen floor. Is that shown as a picture? I guess, is there a photo of that?
Yep, we can go here. So the floor in the kitchen is indeed pieced together from scraps of wood. It's not a sort of representational picture. This was Esherick worked pretty collaboratively with a man named Ed Ray, who was logging the mountain. Ed would bring him by wood that he thought he could do something with. He brought him by a pile of scraps that he said he thought was only good for firework, and the floor is what Esherick built out of Ed Ray's firewood donation. So we hear that Ed Ray saw it and said, "I'm never giving you anything for free again." So it's a really wonderful example of creative reuse, which is very much a part of Esherick's legacy and approach to problem solving in his creative work.
Do we know if you had any interest in Frank Lloyd Wright's work?
We do. Esherick, we're lucky enough to have Esherick's full library still at the museum, and so we can see what he was reading, we can see what he was thinking about. Esherick was interested in Wright's theories of organic architecture. He was interested in the notion that a building should be constructed to look as if it is growing out of the site into which it is placed. He did not think that Wright did a great job of realizing his own theories successfully when it comes to the aesthetics and design, and was much more interested in notions of organic architecture as they were developed by Rudolf Steiner, who, if most folks know as sort of the founder of Waldorf education, was associated with a movement called anthroposophy.
Time for just a couple more here. Someone asked, if you've never been to Wharton Esherick Museum, how would you recommend viewing it? Are there several tour choices?
So we do a standard tour. That's our Experiencing Esherick tour. That is the tour that, and I should mention that the museum is open Thursday through Sunday by appointment only. The only way to view the museum is with a docent guided tour. The Experiencing Esherick tour is the vast majority of what we do. We do have one-off specialty tours that focus on things like campus architecture and storytelling. I don't think there is a bad way to see the Wharton Esherick Museum. So I think whatever fits your availability, you will not lack for exposure and experience and good learning, regardless of what you engage with.
I'll also throw in a plug that we're going to be offering, in collaboration with Esherick, several plein air days this fall. So please go to Brandywine's website if you happen to be an artist and would like to go to that place and not only have a tour of the inside, but then also have the opportunity to sketch and paint on the grounds. That seems like a wonderful idea to invite artists in.
Absolutely. We're very excited to host that. I think I see the question here, is this the first time we've done an outside exhibition? We have loaned objects to other places before. This is the first time that an exhibition has drawn exclusively on the collection of the Wharton Esherick Museum. So it's very, very exciting. And it's by far the biggest loan that we have made to any institution. And we are so thrilled to partner with the Brandywine and with our other partners at the Chazen and the Taft to bring this little piece of the studio to all of these different audiences. It's very exciting.
Great. I think we'll finish up with this last question I see here. What type of wood did he use, and was it locally sourced?
So Esherick began working, he used sort of more exotic woods early in his career, and later began to work almost exclusively with the sort of local woods that you find in the hills that surrounded the studio. And so we have a lot of oak, we have cherry, we have all of these beautiful Pennsylvanian woods that mark this transition between Esherick really sort of just beginning to sort of think through his medium and then living sort of with it and inside it. And you see that progression in the exhibition.
Let's see, we had one quick last question. Are the Winnie the Pooh sculptures in the exhibition?
You'll have to come see them at the museum. Unfortunately, we could not loan everything. But they are still there. They are on view for you. And so hopefully we'll see you there. We'll see you at the Brandywine.
Definitely a richness of objects to view in both locations, which is a good problem to have. So Emily, I want to thank you so much for sharing this little peek at the exhibition and a wonderful view into Esherick's studio. We really look forward to next month delving more into the studio and these questions of Wyeth and Esherick. And if there were any connections, we'll be talking about that in November. And please, starting this Sunday, we hope to see folks at Brandywine to see this exhibition. So thank you.
Thank you for having us. Please, we look forward to seeing you all in the galleries.